Today on Verbal to Visual, we're throwing it back to the old school desk setup because I'd like to share with you a sample lesson from the resource Sketchnoting in the Classroom, which I completed a few years ago, but I've been revisiting the lessons within that course as I look for improvements and additions that I'd like to make to it later this year. In the first set of lessons within that resource, I address individual sketchnoting skills and how you and your students can build those skills. Then a set of lessons about specific sketchnoting processes that you can use. And finally, I look at how you might use sketchnoting in specific subject areas. And it's within that third category that I hope to dig a little bit deeper this year. So I thought it would be a good time to share one of the lessons from that third section, specifically a lesson that addresses how you might use sketchnoting within a science classroom. So here then is a taste of what these subject-specific lessons look like. In this video, we're going to explore how to bring the skill of sketchnoting into the science classroom. Since science involves a lot of visual observations of the world, along with solid reasoning skills in order to do something interesting with those observations, that makes it a field well suited for the individual sketchnoting skills as well as the note-taking processes that we've been exploring. So let's now apply those skills and processes to the study of science. I'm going to break down this lesson into two complementary sections, learning science and doing science. Most science classrooms include some of each. You'll be learning about experiments that have been done in the past and the theories that have come out of those experiments, and you'll likely get to conduct your own experiments so that you can gain a deeper understanding for the process of doing science. Rather than looking first at one and then at the other, we'll take a side-by-side approach as we look at how to apply your visual note-taking tools to each. Let's start with one that overlaps both categories, creating a sketch of an experimental setup, with process notes or conclusions drawn below or around that setup sketch. In the case of learning science, that might help you better understand and remember the conclusions that were drawn from an experiment. In the case of doing science, that will help you to design better experiments and understand why you're doing what you're doing. And you'll be better able to explain that particular setup when it comes time to present your findings to the class in a presentation or write up a report on that experiment. Next, let's talk about how you might use index cards and the one idea per card approach that we explored in a previous lesson. When learning science, this could be a great way to take notes from your textbook as you pull out the most important ideas from each section. By the time you reach the end of a chapter, you'll have those index cards to study from and could even combine them into a mind map or flow chart to help you see the big picture. When doing science, you could use each index card to capture a single observation. Then, after you've made as many observations of the current experiment as possible, you can lay them all out to look for patterns, try to draw conclusions, and maybe even design follow-up experiments to test those conclusions. Next, let's explore flowcharts. In many cases, what you're learning about in a science classroom is something process-oriented. This happens first, then that, and because of that, these other two things happen next. Anytime you hear a process like that being described, try to capture it in a flowchart. That will allow you to see the overall picture of the entire process, and then also dig deeper into the specific steps when you need to. When doing science, you can use a similar approach to describe your experimental process, the specific steps that you've taken as you've conducted that experiment. You might also use a flowchart to share your results and conclusions. Sometimes your conclusions might involve taking logical steps from one idea to the next, and a flowchart can help make sure that your logic is well thought out, that there are no gaps in the chain of reasoning that takes you from your observations to your conclusions. Next, let's explore the flowchart's cousin, the mind map. When learning science, mind maps can help to map out an entire topic. A zoomed out mind map can outline the big ideas within a given unit, And then you can zoom in on any of those big ideas to create another mind map that contains the details of those big ideas. I think mind maps are a good way for instructors to introduce a new topic that you're about to explore at the beginning of a unit. And they're also a good way for students to review that unit at the end, to test how well you understand the ideas that you've been learning about. When doing science, you can use a mind map as a tool to capture your observations. You can create a variety of guiding questions to explore at the center of your mind map, and then surround each guiding question with specific observations that you make while conducting an experiment. Let's next move from mind maps to empathy maps. If you're learning about a specific scientist, you might use an empathy map to gain a deeper appreciation of what that scientist observed about a particular phenomena, and then also what he or she might have been hearing from others about that phenomena, and maybe even the feelings that person might be having when those two conflict with each other. You could also do something similar for a member of the general public at a particular moment in history when certain beliefs were common that no longer are. And depending on the nature of the experiments that you're conducting, you might create an empathy map for yourself to capture what you see, hear, smell, think, and even feel while making observations of an experiment. Finally, let's look at timelines. When learning science, you can use a timeline to chart the progression of understanding of a particular phenomena. Our place in the universe is a great example. From a flat Earth to a spherical one in the center of the universe to a sun-centered solar system. That will help you see that science is a process, not a destination, and that our ideas about a particular phenomena will continue to evolve as we make newer and better observations of that phenomena. When doing science, you can use a timeline when conducting a long-term experiment to show the progression of that experiment and the observations that you make of it over time. And in the world of physics, which is what my teaching background is in, graphs of position versus time or velocity versus time are simply specific versions of a timeline that can tell you a lot about the dynamics of the thing that you're observing move through space and time. Having shared all of these ideas about how you might bring sketchnoting into a science classroom, I hope you're at least a little bit excited to start using one or two of them yourself. I think that those tools can make the act of learning science and doing science a bit more worthwhile and enjoyable. So I wish you luck in putting those ideas to use, and I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at that lesson, and if you're a science teacher, I hope you found some tangible takeaways. And if you'd like to learn more about the full set of resources within Sketchnoting in the Classroom, check out the links below. Thank you so much for watching. I will be back again next week with a new sketchnoting tutorial. Until then.